You're listening to the Morphology Podcast. Thanks for tuning into the Morphology Podcast, aka Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from cyclists who have pedaled to places all over. Each episode, we'll get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, now why haven't I done that yet? Today, meet Eric Paton. Someone who did not consider himself a cyclist, he watched a few YouTube videos and it sparked the urge to ride his bike all the way across Canada. Eric went out and bought his first bike as he neared retirement, and the planning and training began soon after. He shares some of the highlights from his solo adventure, and upon returning, he not only sat down and wrote the book, Live the Dash, 70 Days I Didn't Know I Could Do, he also went on to create Epic Canadian Rides, which is a touring company that helps others live their dreams to do what Eric did. You can find more information at epiccanadianrides.ca. In the meantime, here's my interview with Eric. A warm welcome to Eric from Canada. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing great, Murph. Very much. Hope you're well, and thanks very much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun episode because you did something, I'm going to say epic, because in my opinion it is, and you feel the same way, but I did something very similar a couple of years ago, so we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, I know that you did, and I think it's, I think we did two great feats, and yeah, really remarkable, epic.
Live to tell about it, right?
Yeah.
Well, before we get into your epic bike ride, will you tell the listeners where you live and if there's a cycling culture there?
Yeah, sure. I live in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada, of course. And yeah, I think there is a very vibrant cycling culture here. You know, we've got group riders, recreational, people use bikes for daily errands, commuting. We're a city of probably in the the Toronto city proper, about 3 million. So it's a great option for urban mobility. Of course, there's always challenges, and there's quite a number in the news now with car-oriented cities. They all have, right? Safety, political will, and of course we're in the north, and we get the winter. So you see a lot less people on the bikes and road maintenance and things like that. So yeah, but I think it's pretty vibrant. I think it's pretty great. You can get out urban, the trails. It's great.
And something that I do in the wintertime, because I'm in Iowa, so it's probably similar, weather, but we ride fat tire bikes. So we go on the snow and mud and dirt. Do you also do that up there?
Yeah, no, people do, definitely. Myself, I haven't, but I've got on some of those bikes with the fat tires, and I've got in the mountains and things like that, and then they're pretty incredible. A lot of fun.
Yeah, they are. I definitely feel like I'm like 12 again when I ride that bike, because it's just like kind of bounces all over, and you have to go slow because there's snow and such. But anyway, so have you always been into cycling?
No, I'm not. To be honest with you, I basically started cycling. I was working. I'm now retired. I was working, and I retired at 56. And I retired basically December 31st, 2023. And going into retirement, I just felt like I was working, had a great job, loved it, but I said, there's more to me than this work. So I wanted to go and try and do something else. So I created a huge list of things to do. I was going to go work. I wanted to give back, work for Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to trade school. I wanted to do all sorts of things. And one of the things, I don't know where I saw it, Murph, but I must be on YouTube or something. I saw people riding these long distances. And I said, wow, it just stuck with me in the back of my mind. And I said, I'm going to ride across Canada. And, I said it, and people listened to me, and I said it some more. And finally, that last month that I was going to retire, I went out and bought my first bike. So I had not really been a rider prior to that. So that started my biking life off, and it was pretty magical. So what I did was I jumped right into it, and I created this pain cave in the basement because I bought it in December, so we're cold and ice and whatnot. So I got this trainer, and I hooked myself up with the platform. I used Zwift, and for 3 months I rode in the basement trying to get fit, because I opened my mouth and told everybody I was going to ride across Canada, and wasn't 100% sure how I was going to do it. But I found a group in Canada that did crossings. I was like, okay, I'm doing it with these guys. This is great, and it's sort of a semi-supported group, and everybody cooks for one another, and everything. And I said, okay, this is great. And then whilst in my man cave, I got an email: we can't do the ride this year. I'm like, oh, yeah, so I'm out. That was my out, Murph. My mouth had kind of put me in the spot where I had to do it. And everybody said, so you're really doing it? I said, yeah, I'm doing it, and I'm doing it with this group. And so that was my out, and I was like really devastated. And then I looked around, and there was a couple more groups that said, oh, we think we might do it. And it didn't come off. And then I was, as many people do, research, and I was scouring through these chat discords and whatnot. And someone said, well, I'm looking for someone to start in the West Coast of Canada. And they said, does anybody want to join me? And someone on in the community said, why don't you just do it yourself? You're going to meet people. And so I thought about it, and I looked at my wife and my daughter and my son, and I said, I'm going to do this myself.
Wow.
And they said, absolutely not. They said, absolutely not. And I said, yeah, of course we did. So anyway, that's how my whole biking thing got started. And I just started training in the pain cave, and continued on and did some more training for a couple more months after that, and went for it. But so, sorry for that long-winded answer, but in short, I was never fully into bicycling, but now, I would say.
So you literally went from, like we call it couch to 5K, like, where you're laying on the couch thinking about doing an event, and then boom, you're doing it. So you did couch to solo across Canada. Like that, I mean,
yeah.
The amount of mental motivation that would take for you to pull the trigger is like, it's hard to understand.
Well, yeah, this is the whole thing. Like with the retirement thing, I was kind of like, there's more to me than this. And I also think, sort of, and I saw, Murph, I know you've dealt with this before, but my father also passed away with dementia.
Oh, sure.
A couple years back. Life is short, right? And it is short. And really, we've got, when we get to a certain age, we've only got a certain number of years left, a certain number of good years, right? A number of good years that we want, because, if we live to 80 plus, we're going to slow down.
Right.
It's just going to happen. We'll fight it as much as we can. So we've got, not to bring a downer on this, but we've had a certain number of years left. And I just wanted to do things that, that were in my head. I'm like, yeah, I'm 56, 57 now. I want to do things. I can still do it. And I'm gonna
do it while you can.
I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it. Yeah, exactly. So, and this is what I did, and trained downstairs for 3 months. And then another thing I wanted to do was go and learn Spanish. So I said, well, I'm going to go to Spain and learn Spanish for retirement. I went and I took my bike. I went to Malaga, and I went up and down mountains, 3 or 4 times a week with a training group. The first time I ever rode with a group was I arrived on a Friday. Saturday morning, I was riding in a group in Malaga, and it was the first time ever I was in the back so far. It was so painful. It was like, oh, I gotta stop. But it was, over the months, I got better, and I enjoyed it. And I would go on these long rides with these guys from the group, 160 kilometers by the end of the month. And it was like, yeah, this is a lot of fun. So,
wow.
Yeah, from zero to, but it was just great. It was just really, really enjoyable. Really enjoyable.
Yeah. Okay. So you literally cycled all the way across Canada. And based on what you've told me and what I saw on your social media, you started in the West and went all the way across and ended up at the other coast. So tell us, like, we kind of know the why. You're retired, you're wanting a good project, but tell us a little bit more about that adventure and how it came to be.
Yeah, well, as I said, the first thing was I probably saw it by somebody on YouTube, somebody doing something similar, and I looked at it and I just said, "Well, that's a real feat." I said, "I think I could do something like that." So I just got up and I just said, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Victoria to St. John's, Newfoundland. It's over, 8,000 kilometers, over 5,000 miles, I guess, if we could do the conversions."
Mm-hmm.
The big part of it, Murph, is just to say, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Because, I got the bike and, you have to do it for everything. You do so much research. We can research till, we miss the opportunity to do things. So we research bikes. We research tents. We research frame bags. We research all these sort of different things. What am I going to, what type of pots and pans am I going to take? How much of this am I going to take? Mm-hmm. And I did that, and I went down holes, and everybody's got a opinion on, do I ride tubes or tubeless? And I didn't know. And so I did all this, and I said, okay, I just got to do some stuff. I've got to do it. Right. And then I've got to buy a ticket. So I went to Victoria, British Columbia, bought a one-way ticket. I'm like, I'm going. So I went, and that's how it all kicked off in Victoria, British Columbia, and I started my ride. And when I first got that first day, I made it. The way it works in Victoria, you go up to a ferry. There's a couple different ferry points, but I went to one in Schwartz Bay, and you take a ferry over to, it's called Tsawwassen, near Vancouver. And the toughest part was getting from that ferry terminal to my first campsite. It was like, what have I done? It was 30 plus degrees, 90s, in the 90s. And there's a tunnel, and you could either go through the tunnel or you have to go way around, like many, many, many more kilometers. And I said, well, I'm going to ride. But it was so hot. I was kind of getting frustrated the first day, and I said, this is awful. So I said, I'm going on a bus. I'm putting my bike on the bus, and we're getting through that tunnel. It wasn't far, but we're not allowed to ride through the tunnel. Mm-hmm. First bus comes along, and my bike wouldn't fit because I had these water bottles at the front, and the guy goes, okay, well, get the next one. I tell you, there's only 2 spots for bikes on these buses, and they were full every time they came past. So I was at 2.5 hours sitting in the blazing temperature, and I finally made it to my campsite, and I'm like, yes. And a friend met me there. We had a beer, and it was like, okay, this is nice. Okay, got this now. Here we go. Well, Murph, Canada, much of it is built along the train lines. Mm-hmm. Didn't sleep a wink that night. I was rumbling. The ground was rumbling because I camped a lot during this ride, and the ground was rumbling the majority of the night. But it was okay. I was ready to go. So that was my first day, and at first I thought, what have I got myself into here?
Right.
Into here, but it was great. It was good. It was a great feeling about it.
You're like, I'm going to get some of the, the crappy moments out the first day. So then I can, every time you have a negative experience, that becomes like the good stories. You know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. Well, the second night was, I went to a place and I had read about it, and I went to the campsite, and I'm like, okay, great campsite. And I set up, and there was a garbage bin, a big garbage bin not too far from me. And I didn't think too much of it. But over the night, the people who lived around the area and in the trailers came, and the garbage lid kept raising and raising and raising, and I could smell it. And the locals would come. And the beautiful thing is, everybody came over to me. I wore a yellow shirt. I wanted to be seen on that road, so I wore this bright yellow shirt. And everybody would come over to me and talk, and he goes, "You're going to sleep out here tonight?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Wouldn't?" And I go, well, "Why?" He goes, "Well, there's a few bears around here, so I wouldn't sleep." What? And I'm like 30 feet away from the garbage, and I'm like, I can sleep in here in my tent. But after a while, I kind of said, nope. So I went. There's a place where they had the pool tables and stuff, so I ended up sleeping on the couch. So that was my second night. So yeah, great stories all the way.
Yeah. Okay, so you told us in the beginning that you decided to, whether you wanted to or not, to do this solo. So does that mean you had a support vehicle, or was everything you needed on your bike?
Everything I needed was on my bike. Yeah, I was going solo. So again, I did so much research on what things to take and what not to take. And there's a ton out there, as you probably
yeah,
the different things. And I was going, two pair of socks, two bibs, two pair of underwear, pair of track pants for the evening, and merino. Merino was the, I think, savior for me for the evenings because my smell and after a while and not having to wash it so much.
Right.
And the windbreaker, and then, the pots and pans were pretty small. I had one and a little stove and my first aid kit, and and then just the locks and the tubes and the sealant and the maintenance stuff. But I went pretty low. I had a frame bag and I had a front handlebar bag. And then at the back, a rack where I had about a 30-liter dry bag. And in that, I had my tents, my sleeping bag, and my mattress. Like, oh, this is awesome. So I was all packed. But it was on my second day, I said, I ain't getting enough food in here. So I had to go buy 2 panniers at the thing. And I said, I'm not loading these up with anything more than what I have, but I just need the space because I couldn't get access to everything. So you kind of live and you learn as you go along. So, but yeah, it was solo the whole way.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And okay, so you're talking about your packing. I often ask riders who are self-contained if they brought along a luxury item, something that you didn't really need, but you're glad you had.
You know what? The only probably luxury item is my daughter bought me an outdoor speaker prior to going. So that was really nice to have. Just a speaker to have. I never used earphones on my ride. I didn't listen to music. Some of the times I kind of like, a day, 9 hours on the bike, and I say, what did I think about today? What did I do? Sometimes I think to myself, but yeah, the real luxury item was probably that outdoor speaker, and I think I used everything. The one thing I brought was a flint, and I said, "Oh, it looks like I'm not going to use that." But it was on my fourth last day. My matches had got wet, and I used this flint to start my. So I said, "Wow, I used every single thing." I even had, when I started out, like I had this whole romantic notion. I had this solar panel over the back of my. And I said, I'm going to charge everything with this. And that's going to be great. As I go, I'm going to charge. Well, there's an issue with solar and rain and clouds. It doesn't work so well.
Yeah. And, and when you're documenting, because I'm spoiling this for you, but you ended up writing a book about this. You have to document some way for you to remember, whether it's, writing in a notebook. For me, it was always taking photographs. So you have to be able to charge your devices at some point. And I'm guessing, you were maybe in rural areas occasionally where you didn't have the luxury of charging your devices.
Yeah, no, and I took 2 big battery chargers, like big ones, like 30,000. I forget what you call them for charging the battery charging things. So I had that, and then I always recharge those when I went to a campsite. Sometimes they always have the 30 volts in the campsite, so I didn't have the converter at the time, so I would charge things in the washrooms or stuff. So was pretty good with my power. I made sure, that was obviously a real thing I had to focus on. As soon as I got there, I said, okay, let's start charging. Right. Let's make sure everything's charged, because I would take all my electronics in my tent with me at night and charge them with these battery chargers I had. So, my phone, I got into Instagram, as perhaps you've seen. Yep. I documented every day, and I'd fall behind because so many things happen, meeting people, seeing things. It just kind of fell behind. So every morning I'd be trying to catch up on my Instagram, and it'd be hard. I felt behind a number of days, like so much so, and that people would see me on the road and said, "What are you doing here? I thought you were way back there."
Yeah, it became their part of their normal routine too, to figure out where you are.
Yeah, it did. I love the fact that people were following me, and they would say, I follow you every day, like whenever you post, and I'm like, wow, it's kind of cool. So I thought that was really fantastic.
So one of my favorite parts when I rode across the United States was the fact that really at a high level, all you have to do is get a good night's sleep, get on your bike and ride and rinse and repeat, and occasionally eat in there and drink lots of water, all that kind of stuff. But as we both know, it's way more than that. It's kind of it was almost drama figuring out where to stay every night, especially if you went ahead of what you thought you'd do or you're behind it. So can you give us a feeling of what a typical day was like for you?
Yeah, sure. And I'll tell you at the start, I had a headquarters, and I called my wife HQ because she was there through the ride with me, and sort of not with me, but she was at home, and she would say, "Okay, Eric, here's a spot you can go to, and here's a campsite you might want to consider." So I had that, and she goes, I'm invested more in this than I ever thought I would be. But she was like saying, here's where you can go. And, I'd go to some place and I say, well, hold on, this place isn't, even incorporated. There's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing in this town. Why do they call it a town? And, so there were interesting things along those lines. But a typical day, as I mentioned, I got into the Instagram thing. So I was always an early riser. I'd get up and I would try and do my Instagram. I always had a goal of leaving by 7 or 8 in the morning, and no matter what time I thought I'd go, I always left at least an hour or more later. It just whatever happened, right? So I get up, I prepare my breakfast, generally a bagel, eggs, and coffee, and a banana, and I really made sure that I had some good food in me before I go out. Went break down camp, and then, as I say, tried to get out, leave by 7 or 8, and then the ride would start, and I just stopped when I wanted. And one of the things that I wanted to do, I just didn't want to ride across campus just to say, like, the road across Canada. I wanted to see it.
Yeah.
Wanted to talk to the people, and I wanted to stop where I stopped. So the day, who knows what would happen, during the day. And I would just stop whenever I wanted to stop and, ate amazing pastries at different places. I could tell you some great places with some great pastries across the country, and then break for food and water and stopping at the gas stations. And every time spark up a conversation. Mm-hmm. People would always come over to me and they said, "And what are you doing?" And then the question would come, where are you going to? And I told them, and they would always double take, say, "What?" Right? So, yeah, but people were so interested and so curious, and sometimes I felt like you could see people like, "Oh, wow, I wish I could do that."
Right?
They could. If everything was, they could, but it's just doing it. So yeah, it was and then like you said, the days went by so quick. Like I didn't have a ton of time to just sit around, because then I'd have to go shopping for my, groceries for the evening. Right. Because I couldn't pack like multiple days. And then you'd have to go to camp, set up, and then start cooking, and then try and do the Instagram. But oftentimes, different things, as I said, people would come over and we'd start talking. And sometimes I met people and we had a few drinks that night because they were off to somewhere, and they had their camper set up, and they said, "Come on over and we'll talk." And we had a beer, or people would, make dinner for me, or, so, and the days, and then I said, "Oh my gosh, I was going to do Instagram today. I thought I'd get here at 4 or 5 o'clock, do Instagram and catch up." And that's how I just kept falling behind. But, that was a day, and and I'd go to bed around 10 PM or so. And, they just filled up, and it's like, every day. And it was just really, really, really fantastic.
If you look at, one of the things that I super, super enjoyed about riding across the United States was how every day was different as far as meeting people, but also the places that you see when you're on a bicycle versus being in a car going at, 70 miles an hour or whatever. So do you have any highlights that you want to share, whether it's about people or places?
Yeah, I mean, the highlights, it's incredible. I mean, the West Coast is the ocean. I used to live out there, and I honestly thought that, the West Coast is one of the most beautiful places in the world, with the ocean, the mountains. I'm like, how can you possibly beat that? And then you go, you've got it like the prairies, and people say, "Oh, it must be so boring and flat." And I guess, I just like, it was beautiful. I mean, the canola was, and the crops, the yellow, the brightness, the small towns, I mean, I met some of the people that I still talk to now from the ride, and we're still connected. And one fellow met me, like, we tried to connect like 3 different times across the country. It was just in different places at different times. And then you go somewhere and you're like, okay, how am I gonna top that West Coast with that mountains and the ocean? And then, as I say, I see the prairies in that different beauty. And sometimes I would just find myself, staring at rivers. I get mesmerized by it,
Right.
or crops, or the grass blowing in the winds. But then I hit the Canadian Shield, north of Lake Superior, and through these areas. I've never really come up there, and there were so many places like that, Murph, where I'd been to before, but I'd never really taken the time to look. And it's like, if this is stunning. I think this is actually could it actually better the mountains? I said, this is incredible. And then I go through Quebec. I'm in Montreal and Quebec, and I'm going to fromageries, to sell cheese and all this, and I'm riding along the St. Lawrence River, and I go into the eastern part of Canada, and the covered bridges, and just the small towns, and the live music and the East Coast music, and then I go to this Newfoundland, this province with was it 150,000-200,000 moose, and I never saw one, by the way. Oh. But it's a hilly monster that really took its toll on me.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful. But when I live, as I said, outside of Toronto, and there's a highway called Highway 401, and you go by all these towns that I see the signs, these Brookville, Gananoque, all these different towns, but I rode through them, and I rode through them slowly, and I'm like, yeah, this was here.
Wow.
And so it was just like, it's beautiful. You're like right on the river, beautiful downtowns. You stop for a coffee and say, wow, and that's what the joy of the whole ride, the cycling, was, to go and slow at that pace and to really see things like, up front and, close and up front. And it was spectacular.
And the pride of the people in those small towns, or just the businesses that you visit. I love that part about it too, where you can just feel like, welcome to our community. Look at this. Like, let's talk, all of that.
And the stuff, the people, it was all the people. Like, I had some, great interactions. I had, people, husband and wife, saying, hey, we've got this, this extra house over here, a guest house. Come and stay here. Right?
Oh, wow.
He was, he was a CEO of a former company, and he's a chair now of on a board, and just super people, and just brought us in. And and they invited me for dinner, and we had a great time. And even like the one thing, I really got a surprise were the truckers, Murph. The truckers were amazing. Like, sometimes you'd on these smaller 2-lane highways, and they would always move over for you.
Oh, wow.
Move over. And then I'm sitting in a coffee shop having a coffee, and they would come up and so curious about what I was doing, to buy me coffees, donuts, so people giving me places, people giving me water.
Right.
It was amazing. But then I also got introduced, and I'm sure warm showers.
Oh, yes.
The program Warm. I'd never done it before, and I'd heard about it through people that I met on the route. And I said, I want to try it. So I went to one place and I tried it, and I couldn't believe it. I met this lady, Bonnie, in Medicine Hat, Alberta, and about an hour and a half out, I sent her a message. She goes, I'm just at the grocery store. Come on over. Here's my address. And it was this grandmother. And, she was 72 72, 75. I can't exactly recall. She brought me in, said, here's your place. And then she toured me around her city so proudly.
Oh,
it was incredible. Yeah, offered me dinner, and I had just eaten prior to, and then got up and breakfast. And I said, and I tried to give her money. And she goes, no, this is not the way the program works. And I'm like, and then just thanked her. And, and she said, I've got somebody else coming in today, so you might see them on the road. And I did. And I told my friends about this. So I live in Toronto, big city, 3 million. And I told her about what she did. And they're like, I go, you guys aren't going to believe this. And I'm like, and everybody just floored. And it's like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just really an incredible experience. And so they really, introduced me even further to that whole cycling community and, what it's about. It was It's unbelievable.
Wow. And for those who don't know, Warm Showers is basically, I believe it's a nonprofit, and it's a app. And basically, if you live in an area that a lot of cyclists come through, you can offer up your home or a room or your backyard or whatever at no cost. And then on the flip side, if you're a cyclist, you can go on this app and like think, all right, tonight I'm going to be in this community. Is there a Warm Showers host? And then you get connected that way. So it's complete strangers, but in theory, you have the same common likes of cycling.
Yeah, it's such an incredible thing to think that that's out there.
Right.
And I've really heard the stories about it and the relationships that people have developed and becoming part of the family. Now, I just drove with my daughter from we're just driving across Canada for about something we'll talk about later, but I stopped in to see her.
Oh,
I
really?
brought her. She didn't want it, but I brought her a bunch of things because I know she's probably had over 100 people come through her house.
Oh my gosh.
So I brought her a bunch of stuff that, and I stopped, and sure enough, she had someone from Spain, I think, visiting her from, I think she did the El Camino with her. And so it was just, really nice to see her again. It was so good.
Right.
It was really great, but it was so uplifting and warming and like incredible. Like, yeah, people do that still, Murph, and that's really incredible.
Yeah. And I already know the answer based on the way that you've been speaking for the last few minutes, but do you feel like this ride changed your life?
Oh yeah. It's changed me, and me thinking about what I am capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed me about when I see more bicyclists on the road, the respect I have for them, for everybody, and thinking about, as I say, Bonnie from Warm Showers, just the generosity, and just also everybody, Murph. It's when you are out there, we're not seeing what we're seeing on TV. We're seeing people caring for people.
Right.
We're seeing people laugh. We're not talking about any of the bad stuff that we hear. I know it's out there, and we all know it's out there, but we're seeing real life and talking to, like you and I are talking now, and having good conversations and learning from people all the different things about the local areas they stop. And you're right, as you said earlier, the pride that people have, and it's the good stuff. It's not the stuff we see on TV, but the good stuff's out there, and there's a lot of it. And it's really incredible. The one story I heard, and it really was kind of sad. And one person said they were on their bike ride and they met some people, and they said, "Where are you going?" And the guy said, "Well, I'm heading this way." And he goes, "Well, be careful." And he goes, "Why? What have you heard?"
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Well, I heard some things not too good." And he goes, "Have you been there?" He goes, "No." He goes, "But I've heard, and just be careful." And it's just like, you've got to get out there and experience things, but because things aren't that bad,
right.
In a lot of places, and there's just kind, generous, heartwarming, fun people, and that's what most people want to be, and that's what most people are.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to see it front and close.
Yeah, and it's just being able to slow down your life so that you can experience all of that and see it in action is beyond. And so obviously this, affected you in a way so much so that not only did you write a book about it, but you started a business that has to do with biking. So you have to tell us about these.
Well, yeah. Okay. The book is pretty crazy because there's a person, my book is called Live the Dash, 70 Days I Didn't Know I Could Do. And the reason for Live the Dash is I have a very good friend. His name's Rocky. And he has this tattoo on him called Live the Dash. And I'm like, "Rocky, what is that tattoo?" And he goes, and he told me what it's about. And it's from a poem. It's basically, when you look at a tombstone,
Mm-hmm.
Your birth, what you see on there is your birth and your death dates. And in between is the dash. And that dash is short, and that represents your life. Now, basically, it should be lived to its fullest.
Mm-hmm.
So everything in your life is representative of that dash. So, you got to be as good as you can and good to people and respectful. But your life is represented by a dash. And it just resonated with me so much. I'm like, yeah, this is the the dash, my life. I got to live it as much as possible. So I'm talking to Rocky, and he said, Eric, he goes, I wrote these books, and he wrote these two books, one about TV and one about, I think it was about how to use recipes for an air fryer or something like really off. And he goes, next time you go on a trip, you got to take a pen and pencil, some paper, and write notes. Maybe you could write a book. I said, Rocky, I did an Instagram post every day, and I took thousands of pictures, and I said, so I kid you not, that night I got home around 8 o'clock from seeing him, and I stayed up to 4 the next morning, and I wrote my first chapter.
Wow!
And I just started watching, I just started writing after that, and I was never a writer before this, certainly not. And I would get up at 7 a.m. and go till about 11 at night, and I did that for a few weeks. So I said to my wife, I gotta stop this because this is taking over my life here. So I can't start till 4 p.m. I got to do other things before this, and it didn't happen. And it happened for a bit, and then I went back to working on it all day, and I just got into it. And all of a sudden, I created this book, and I just said, "This is it. This is how I speak, and this is how I put it up on Amazon." And I wasn't in it to make money. I just in it to have this story, and I just shared the story, and I enjoyed it, and so far people are enjoying it too, which is great.
Yeah.
So,
for sure. Tell us again the title of the book.
It's called "Live the Dash: 70 Days I Didn't Know I Could Do" by Eric Paton. Named Paton. Yeah, and from that, I'm getting. How has this cycling changed your life? It's kind of gone into a place I never thought it would go. So now we're, looking at some speaking engagements about not only about the bike tour, but also about retirement and what's possible. Mm-hmm. Because, one of the things when I was retiring, I went to a lot of retirement parties, events, and everybody they talk about the person retiring, and what they want to do in retirement is travel and spend more time with the family. And that was the common thing. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that too. Of course I want to do that. There's more to it than that, because again, I only have, I think, these certain number of years, hopefully a good number of them, but to do what I want to do. And so this cycling, so that, we're talking to retirement groups about what's possible and the different things, because as I said at the outset, I was never a cyclist, but yeah, things have changed.
Right.
And now, my way on the ride, I had so many comments. Oh, I love this, Eric. I'm going to do this when I retire, or when I finish it, I'm going to do this when I retire. And there wasn't a company, as I said at the outset, there was a company that was going to do this across Canada, and it was kind of semi-supported. And I thought, I was like, so many people, and I loved it, because would I do it again? Yes, in a heartbeat. I'd actually do it again. It was that enjoyable for me. And I'm like, why don't I try this and take some people across Canada with me? Mm-hmm. And I wrote it, and I probably change up my route a little bit, just because, when you're going on things, you want to see certain things because you're in Canada or you're Canadian. And so I've been driving across Canada now and meeting with people and, scoping all the sites. So I'm going to drive across 2 more times, and I'm going to take people, and it's going to be a fully supported ride with a chef, with guides, with content creator. And I think about all the little things I didn't have that I might wanted to have. Like sometimes you're just, what part of the big part of for me was doing the cooking, and by the time you clean up, it's not a lot of time at night. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, if you have all that done, and I bring in musicians, I love live music. So bring in local musicians, local people who can talk, fun evenings, not too strenuous, because we're going to do a lot of riding that day, but for a couple hours, and just make it, a nice evening, a nice community, see the country, because there's great things right across the country, and meet fantastic people. And that's kind of what I want to do. And I'm gonna hopefully and see how it goes. And I'm really excited about it. So
yeah. And you're taking out the part that's the hardest for people, is taking that first plunge, planning it, figuring out the route. How am I going to cook? All that. You're just like, hey, I got that part covered. You just need to find the time and pull the trigger.
That's it. Yeah. And what I did, Murph, because I realized not everybody has 70 days. I mean, if you're retired, okay, or if you can do, maybe perhaps even work on the road, you have the 70 days. So I broke it up into segments where, we've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks, different options available. So you can do the first 2 weeks, say from Vancouver to Calgary, which is a big, when people come to Canada, they want to go to Banff. They love Banff. They love Vancouver.
Yeah.
So, but there's so much other great things. And so I've broken it up. And, if people were to come back year after year, perhaps, so they eventually could do the whole country or do the one whole ride with that would be great too. So I thought it would be something to try and something I'm pretty passionate about now. And I'm really looking forward to it.
And what time of year is the ride going to occur?
June 21st, and we'll probably finish up around Labor Day weekend. So, and I know so it is a combination of camping and hotels, and I know not everybody loves camping. It is quite fun though. It's a lot of fun, but I know some people don't want to, sleep on a mat. So, but I loved it. I never had any issues with it, and hopefully, if I go again, when we do go again in the subsequent years, we'll have another version where we just do hotels. But as you know, when you go across these places, they're not the Sheraton or the Hilton or anything like that. There can be smaller places, but again, pride of ownership is really out there in a lot of these places, and some of these motels are really beautiful, and the people that own them. I mean, I've had stays where they said, "Okay, I'll take you into town, so you don't have to ride your bike anymore. I'll come pick you up when you're done." Like those things happen, and it's great. It's great.
And I assume you have a website for people who are maybe like, you know what, it's time. I'm going to ride my bike across Canada with these guys.
Yeah, epiccanadianrides.ca. That's the website, and you can follow me on Instagram and YouTube. So I'm putting all that up and posting, and you can see some of the sites across this great country.
Cool. And I am on your website right now, and I can see that you can also buy the book.
You can also buy the book. Yeah, you can also buy the book. And the book, the nice thing about it is you can sort of live the ride with me, because I put in there the QR code, which links you back to my other Instagram called Live the Dash Book, which has my full 70 days of Instagram. So you can sort of see what I was actually going through as you read the book.
Oh, cool. Well, Eric, I am so thankful that you took the time to talk to me about your adventure, and I am looking forward to following it along next June.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. And it's been a pleasure meeting with you and talking with you.
You bet. Well, listeners, that's it for this week. Email me at murphologypodcast@gmail.com if you have a topic or the name of a cyclist you find interesting. Support my podcast at patreon.com/murphology, and visit both my Facebook and Instagram pages for daily entertainment.